Good morning and welcome to McGill's Dementia Education Program's Caring Conversations, a free community outreach initiative to provide virtual support to care partners of people living with dementia. The McGill Dementia Education Program offers a comprehensive range of free resources to educate and support people living with dementia, family and informal caregivers, healthcare professionals, medical students, and the public at large. An important resource is Dementia, Your Companion Guide, which is available online for free in 14 languages. Printed copies can also be obtained on Amazon. We also recently launched a free online course designed to educate and support care partners of people living with dementia. It's available in English and French and consists of 10 self-guided online modules that you can go through at your own pace. It includes expert advice, shared experiences from participants, and solutions to the challenges of being a care partner in the context of dementia. Caring Conversations is an initiative of the McGill Dementia Education Program and is supported by private donations. This episode and all episodes from this year are supported by the Petro-Canada Caremakers Foundation. And now let's meet our moderators. Lucy Barylak received her Master of Social Work from the McGill University School of Social Work. She's developed evidence-based training for seniors and caregivers, and she's lectured in the field of social gerontology and presented at major conferences. Her research studies have been published in numerous journals. Ms. Barylak received the Queen's Jubilee Award for her role in developing a national coalition to support caregivers across Canada. Joanne Besner is an educator, professional coach, and caregiver. She received her Bachelor of Social Work of Business Administration from McGill University. Her 35-year career in public community healthcare in Quebec spans many roles, including frontline case manager, clinical supervisor, manager, researcher, and trainer. Today's topic is guilt and self-care. Joanne and Lucy will dive into the emotion of guilt and the importance of prioritizing self-care. We ask that you please keep your microphones turned off. We will unmute people as needed once we open the discussion. Please note that we are recording today's webinar and the recording will be posted on the Caring Conversations page of our website. Lucy and Joanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Diane, and thanks always for your beautiful and warm introductions. Hello, everyone who's come and joined us today for this topic. Being a caregiver comes with a complex set of emotions that can change from moment to moment. We address some of these common emotions, including sadness and anger and uncertainty in our webinar last month. This month, we're devoting the entire session to one of the toughest emotions to deal with, guilt. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to look at what is the definition of guilt. And we're going to look at why and when care partners feel guilty, how to cope better through strategies. And we're going to finish by looking at the importance of self-care, but also why it can be so challenging. So getting started, what is caregiver guilt? Negative feelings of distress, feeling like I must have done something wrong, or I'm not good enough. So guilt is difficult to pin down, but we all know when we feel it, that guilty feeling in your gut for a thought you've had or something you've said or done. And even more so when these thoughts and actions don't coincide with your belief. Whoops. Sorry. Whoops. Don't coincide with your beliefs, your values, your family, or your culture. Caregiver guilt often arises from feeling inadequate, having self-blame, and the inability to fulfill all of the responsibilities associated with caregiving. Some people may feel they are never doing enough for the person they're caring for, even when validated by others. Guilt feels bad, but it actually has a positive function. Guilt is our moral compass. So if our actions result in negative outcomes, the emotion of guilt is going to let you know. Guilt can inspire you to be better or it can paralyze you. As a care partner to someone living with dementia, we may feel guilt unnecessarily. This feeling could be based on our perceptions that we did the wrong thing, or we're uncertain whether we did the wrong thing. And guilt seems to be an occupational hazard for many family care partners. If you ask people, that guilty feeling is often shared. But just because you feel guilty doesn't mean it's warranted. Guilt isn't always a moral compass. It can be an indicator of a pattern of self-denial, self-abuse, self-criticism, or even self-destruction. Guilt can be so profound that it can lead to anxiety and physical symptoms like problems with sleeping, stomach problems, digestion problems, and even muscle tension. When these feelings are repeated, they're not helping you emotionally. They are hindering you. So I've divided the causes. We're going to look at the causes of guilt now. I've divided them into 5 themes that we're going to talk about. And while it may be impossible to prevent all feelings of guilt, and we don't want to prevent all guilt, we do want to take certain steps, though, to process and manage our caregiver guilt when we notice it. So as I go through these 5 themes, I want you to just recognize if you're feeling this way. And I want to invite you, if you want to share in the chat. If you recognize some of these guilt feelings, it can be so reassuring to your fellow care partners here today to know they're normal, they're shared, and you're not alone. So what causes caregiver guilt? We're going to look at the past, relationships and history. Then we're going to look at ourselves, the image we have of ourselves. We're going to also tackle caregiver functions, the occupational impacts of just doing the job. Then having negative thoughts and actually actions toward your care receiver. And finally, looking at becoming the decision maker for the other person. So, have you ever regretted how you treated the person's behaviors before you discovered the diagnosis? Maybe you were frustrated and impatient towards them before knowing this was due to dementia, and then they were diagnosed, and that can produce a healthy dose of guilt. Keep in mind, dementia can have a profound effect on a person's behavior, and without knowing there was an underlying condition, these changes can be very difficult to understand. You did the best you could with the information you had at the time. Unresolved past relationships and history with family members can influence the caregiver relationship naturally. These past relationships or continuing family dynamics are not erased with the diagnosis of dementia. Same people, same problems. Not everybody finds themselves in a situation where they like or necessarily love the person they're caring for. Some even feel forced, or it's not really their choice. And as well, let's be honest, even if there's love and good relationships, everyone gets frustrated with their partner or family members from time to time, too. What about how you feel about yourself and your image of the ideal you? You may have an image of yourself, ideally, which includes your values, how you relate to others, and maybe you have an idea about the kind of caregiver you want to be. Guilt often arises when there's a mismatch between your actual day-to-day reality, how you're acting, and the vision you have of yourself caring. Not good enough can mean not patient enough, not sensitive enough, not kind enough or caring enough, not skilled enough, not devoted enough, not spending enough time. Are these reasonable standards by which to judge yourself? What is enough? And is it ever going to be enough? Additionally, caregivers are untrained. You didn't sign up for this. You're unprepared. So understandably, maybe you feel insecure in your role at times. You might ask yourself, am I doing enough? But should I be doing something different? What if I do something wrong? What about comparing oneself to others? So meeting up with other care partners at support groups or reading about other people's experiences is healthy practice. No one is going to understand what you're going through more than fellow care partners. But this also comes with the risk that you may think or you may observe that other carers seem to be coping better than you are. You may feel guilty you haven't lived up to the same level. Perhaps you've always been a high achiever and successful at everything you have undertaken and want to excel at this role too. Comparing yourself to others, other care partners, can be harmful. And remember, you can never truly know what's going on in someone else's household. A caregiver may appear to be doing just fine on the outside, but they have their own struggles. Maybe the person you're taking care of isn't improving or deteriorating more than others you know. Caregivers can blame themselves falsely, believing if they did something differently or if they did something better, our person's medical condition would improve. You cannot take on that responsibility of the illness outcome of dementia. And what about when other family members and care partners judge and criticize you? Is this ever happening to you? It's bad enough with you judging yourself, but when others come along and do it, they can open up your already present wounds and make you question yourself even more. They may not agree with your decisions, your methods, or approaches. Maybe they think they could do it better. Now let's look at the physical reality of the job. Fatigue. You may feel tired, even exhausted. Multiple demands and tasks. Not only if you live with this person, but if you're living elsewhere. You're running from your household to their household, competing priorities, losing time, missing out, and sometimes even pain and discomfort from helping transfer a person, and which can also lead to physical ailments. So I call this the occupational hazards of caregiving. Caregivers are frequently trying to juggle multiple tasks and roles simultaneously. In addition to being a caregiver, you may be a spouse or a partner, a parent, a grandparent, an employee, a daughter, a son, a student, a friend. Nobody can perfectly juggle all of these roles all the time. Something is bound to give. Now, what about feeling guilty about getting angry or irritated? So you're tired. It's all getting to you. Maybe you're feeling exhausted, resentful, unappreciated for the care you're giving, or wishing you had more help and not getting it. Maybe you raised your voice. Maybe you even yelled or lashed out. If you feel angry and frustrated, you may occasionally direct this toward the person you're caring for. It happens. Feeling resentment can build up, and many carers find it hard to forgive themselves in this situation, especially if they've done something or said something hurtful. I'm sure everyone here today with us would agree that caregiving can be very stressful, and anger or frustration are natural for everyone in this situation. We need to be compassionate with ourselves. However, Lucy and I want to encourage you to keep your anger under control. If you feel you're not able to, this is a signal to ask for help. And finally, in later stages, the caregiving role may require you to take on decisions for the other when they can no longer make proper choices. And this can include things like hiring help at home, keeping the person safe, such as assuring they no longer drive or cook, and the big one, relocation to a different care setting. These decisions can be emotionally draining. Regarding hiring help, many carers feel they should be able to manage without any help, and even ashamed about accepting help from others, especially when the person only wants you. And one of our participants wrote in about this. But looking after a person with dementia, we just said, can be exhausting physically and emotionally. Caregivers report feeling guilty about some of the hard decisions they make. Taking away car keys, turning the fuses off on the stove or oven, taking over the finances, imposing these losses on someone else are painful for both of you. This is the big one. You may experience caregiver guilt when you're faced with the decision of relocating your person to a care facility. You might think you've let them down. It's a betrayal. You should have been able to cope for longer. Maybe you promised them you'd always look after for them in their home, and now you're feeling forced to break that promise. Remember, any promises made were probably in a completely different situation. You're still a care partner. It's just a different way of caring. And this is hard to say. Wishing it would end. Lucy and I hope that we've created a safe enough space here in our webinar to say things out loud that are uncomfortable but true. So I'm going to say it again. Wishing the caregiving would end by the person you're caring for going to hospital or long-term care or even dying. And if the person you're caring for has passed away, you may even be experiencing caregiver survivor guilt, or you may be feeling some relief. Admitting relief can be another source of guilt. These are very heavy emotions to say out loud. But imagine giving yourself permission to say this. I hate to admit this to myself, but I'm resentful that this illness changed all of our lives. Remember, you're not resenting the person, you're resenting the illness. So putting this feeling into words can also help gain a new perspective. You'll be reminding yourself of how fortunate you are to have what it takes to care for someone living with dementia. So now I've just listed so many causes and reasons that induce guilt. So if you are experiencing guilt, no wonder. So now we're going to move forward to how are we going to deal with and manage all of these heavy feelings. So I am going to start the discussion about coping with caregiver guilt with 4 words. Guilt, like any other feeling and emotion, is like any other pain. It's an alert to listen to. We presented this 4-step approach last session when we were talking about other emotions, sadness, and anger. Notice, pause, listen, and act. So whenever you're dealing with any kind of painful emotion, acknowledging the feeling is the first step toward overcoming it. I'm going to go over this briefly. For those of you who were with us last month, you're going to recognize it, but it really helps to repeat this strategy, which is so useful. Number 1, notice. Don't try to suppress or ignore your caregiver guilt. Instead, identify the feeling and where it's coming from. Understanding why you feel guilty is going to help you find a resolution. But first, we want you to start simply by noticing it. Notice when it happens. Unrecognized guilt eats at you. Name it. You may even be triggered by the emotion of guilt, and this can cause you to react in a way that can hinder you. This is what we want you to avoid. So you're going to do number 2, pause. Instead of reacting, take a pause, a moment to breathe and focus on the breath. Breath in, breath out. The act of breathing can take you out of your head and help bring you to a calmer place. You want to acknowledge the feeling without reacting. And if taking a breath doesn't work for you, find another physical way to focus on calming yourself down. This is step 1 to self-regulating your emotions. We can't go into it in more detail, but I encourage you to consult our previous webinar on emotions and also positive intelligence if you want more information about how to pause and use the breath. Once you've calmed yourself down, you are ready for step 3. Listen. Listen to the message your emotions are telling you and identify where the guilt feelings are coming from. Recall all the causes that we've just discussed in the webinar so far. Are your guilt feelings linked to one of those? A specific situation, or maybe a broader pattern in your relationship with your person? What's going on? Is there something you need to change or address, or do you just need to accept? What are your options and choices? Be compassionate with yourself. There's no one way a caregiver should feel. So when you give yourself permission to have the feeling and recognize they don't have to control your actions, your guilt may subside. And fourth, finally, once you are calm, activate. This is when you decide what you must do differently and then act on it. So now I'm going to pass you over to my colleague Lucy, and she's going to talk about some of these actions you can take to guide us through coping strategies and how to prioritize self-care.
Thank you so much, Joanne. Welcome, everybody. So when we pause and listen to ourselves, what are some of the messages and options we may uncover when we look at our triggers? Okay, so let's start with your image of yourself. There's no such thing as a perfect carer, and it's important to not be too hard on yourself. Can you redefine your image of the ideal you? You made the best choices based on your resources and knowledge at the time. As you look to the future, you can create a refined version of the ideal you. Make it realistic. So let's look at that. Reevaluate your expectations, what you can and cannot do or just don't want to do. Credit yourself that you are doing it well enough. Accept your caring cannot control the disease outcomes. Okay, there's a lot of uncertainty. Accept your imperfections. We are only human. Don't compare yourself to others, okay? It's not a contest. Focus on your own life, your own family, and your own responsibilities. However, if you find comparison to be a good motivator, then it's okay. Compare your current self to your best self. Notice how you've grown over time and set long-term goals so that you can continue to grow. And that's what it's all about. It is a sense of growing. Guilt. When other family members and care partners judge and criticize you. Joanne kind of touched on that. You know what you need to do. Setting boundaries with family and friends is essential. Other caregivers may mean well, but all this advice and suggestion can be overwhelming for, from relatives and friends, which can add to your emotional burden. Others must recognize you have the right to set boundaries and assert your needs to preserve your mental and emotional well-being. By communicating openly and honestly with family and friends about your limits and the support you require, you can actually reduce feelings of guilt and prioritize your own needs without compromising the quality of care that you provide for that person. Now, there's also the whole idea of self-blame for the state of the loved one. You may ask, why did my loved one get sick? Why not me? This is what's known as survivor guilt. This applies more to spousal relationship. Perhaps the person you are caring for is not improving. Care partners can blame themselves falsely, believing if they did something else, a loved one's medical condition would improve. You cannot control the outcome of this disease. Now, I want to talk about self-care. What does self-care look like to you? You know, self-care is the ultimate coping skill to be a healthy and effective care partner. What does self-care look like to you? Ask yourself. What do we mean when we use the term self-care? Self-care is the practice of individuals looking after their mental and physical health, using the knowledge and information available to them. Here are the key words that you should keep in mind. It's a decision-making process that empowers individuals to look after their own well-being. You need to take ownership and accept that you are the only one that can give yourself that very, very special gift. You know, prioritizing self-care means identifying what works for you and make time for those activities. How well you create the time, you ask yourself, what will you need to seek support from family and friends and access care services to be able to do this and recharge yourself. Self-care, I want to tell you, self-care is an act of self-love. You can feel guilty when you care for yourself. This is tricky, I have to say, okay? Maybe you are thinking, it's not worth it. I will feel even more guilty. Let's say you want to go to a movie, out for coffee with a friend, or go for lunch, or even go to the gym. Care partners will sometimes say, well, is it selfish of me to do these things because my person is not able to? Or it is not fair for me to go out. So that's when the guilt sort of sets in. So understanding that you will be a more effective caregiver when you care for the caregiver, for yourself first. Remember the oxygen mask that you put on the plane when they tell you to do that? It really makes sense. As a care partner, when you care for yourself, you increase and improve your own caring. I want to say that women in particular bear incredible guilt to care for themselves because we have been conditioned to put others first. When you care for yourself, you feel rested and more relaxed. You can improve your caregiving duties, especially minimizing the risk of potential verbal and even physical abuse to them and to yourself. Very much what Joanne was speaking about. Now, Joanne touched on these hazards, on occupational hazards. So let's look at them once again. What they really are there's tremendous fatigue, multiple demands and tasks, competing priorities, doing things for them, not for yourself, losing time, not being able to do things you enjoy, missing out, maybe going out with friends or family even, pain and discomfort, physical ailments. So if you feel any of these feelings or responses, a red flag should really go off. Now, one of the things that it's very important. You need to prioritize your mental and physical well-being. It should be your number one priority. Eating well, eating healthy is extremely important. Minimizing sugar or processed food, focusing more on fresh fruits and vegetables, and protein. Sleep is essential, very important. Not getting a good night's sleep can affect you physically as well, believe it or not, cognitively. You can wake up really feeling very, very not even able to concentrate. One of the things that is very important is move your body. Moving is so important. Having an exercise routine is ideal. However, if it's too difficult to do, walking is an amazing exercise. Just keep active. Even park your car a little bit further from the front door to give you those extra steps. Now, the other methods could be spiritual practice. You can do meditation, chanting, breathing exercises. But it could also be your daily interactions with other people, as well as staying in the moment, engaging in nature and being aware of your surroundings. The other thing is, please see your doctor if you haven't seen them in a long time. Review your medications that you're on and possible side effects. Even over-the-counter medications can have a lot of side effects that you might not even be aware of. So I want to be a little bit more specific about self-care, okay? So One of the things is, we said that, we keep saying it over and over again, setting your own boundaries, acknowledge what you can and cannot do, and having the ability to actually say no. Time apart. It's important for all couples and or whatever the person you're caring for to be apart. You need small breaks. Just pausing, listening to music, all the things that I was saying before. Everyone needs time for themselves. There are respite for a day or a week, an opportunity to regroup. These services are available. There are, as I said, you need to really research what's available in your community, in your town, or your city. Treat yourself. You're allowed. Go for coffee with a friend. Get a massage. Plan a day trip. Getting your person used to others. As a care partner, we always feel that we are the only ones that can do a good job. But, that's not the case. Others can be as helpful as well. And the person you're caring for really needs to get used to other people, because you cannot be there 24 hours a day. Find balance. Continue to engage in your work, hobbies, and spend time with friends. And allow yourself to find joy and purpose outside of your caregiver role. Joanne and I always tell you that there are two people in this relationship. Not one or the other is more important. There needs to be a balance. Caregiving is an important responsibility, but it shouldn't be your entire identity. To maintain your mental health, you should find a balance between caregiving and other aspects of your life. Now, this is an important one. Seek social support, as a lot of you are doing by being here today. We know caregivers isolate themselves, which can then have a very negative effect on your mental well-being, like depression, burnout, and sadness. So reach out to other people. It could be individually or support groups. Not everyone understands how physically and emotionally exhausting caretaking is. So connecting with other caregivers can help you feel understood. You're not alone in your experience, and hearing from those who relate to you can be comforting. So lean on your support network. Feeling guilty for wanting time apart, okay? You may feel guilty about having time to yourself, but ask yourself, do you deserve that time to yourself? How can you feel good when you're feeling bad? Well, I think you need to focus on the present, what's going on right now. Take the joy, all the small moments that you've been having, and keep reminding yourself that you're doing the best that you can. Maybe, the whole idea of feeling guilty about anger or irritation. Yes, Joanne talked about that. It's really important to explore the context for your behavior or the action that you're feeling guilty about. So ask yourself, what was going on at the time? Was the person you are caring for being difficult, having a bad day, resisting your attempts to help? Were you feeling tired, depleted, anxious, angry, pulled in many directions? Practice self-compassion and reframe your negative thoughts by acknowledging that it's normal to have mixed emotions and limitations. You're allowed to have a bad day. So the most important thing is, please forgive yourself. Deal with your emotions, frustrations, and anger. Acknowledge your feelings. Seek self-regulation measures like mindfulness or breathing, or as Joanne said, take a pause, stop, regroup yourself. If needed, some of us need professional help. Okay, so let's look at that. When to get professional help. There could be a risk of caregiver burnout. There's the powerful emotion mix of guilt, anxiety, resentment, speaking honestly to vent feelings and not feel judged for having them. That is so important, not to feel that you're being judged and to need to be understood. Caregiver burnout is a common phenomena, and guilt plays a major part in the burnout. Mental health professionals add an additional layer of support by helping caregivers to understand and process these emotions. They can also teach coping and problem-solving skills that will prove to be a valuable tool for you and for the person actually that you're caring for. Now, engage a therapist. In some cases, though, guilt is a complicated and deeply rooted emotion that's difficult to unpack on your own. As Joanne said, there's a lot of history behind the relationship, a lot of issues that were bothering you, and you really did not have the time to even explore it, understanding the dynamics of what's going on, and to work through the complex emotions of really being a care partner and feeling all these guilt and sadness, all the emotions that you're going through. So what I want to say is that you don't have to do this alone. And since you don't, it's time now. Let's have a caring conversation. Hi, everybody.
We did receive quite a few questions when we sent out the registration link. So thank you so much to everyone who contributed. If you do have a question, please feel free to either raise your hand or to post it in the chat. And if we don't hear from you, then Joanne has some questions that she's going to answer. Thank you.
Anything in the chat, Diane, at all? Or anyone have a question? Or should we share some of those now, some of the other questions?
Well, there was a comment that Janet made when you were speaking about sometimes she feels that a trigger is her sister's dementia behavior. So I don't know if you wanted to address that.
The trigger is the dementia behavior. So I just think it's such a it's such a common feeling that those behaviors can trigger you. And I go back to the 4 words. What do? You first insight about that, understanding that's the trigger. It's the behavior. That's the cue. And I found it helps sometimes if you're going to use those 4 words to journal. When you notice it, mark it down, note it. Awareness is the first step. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, if it's triggering me, that behavior is not going to change. It's going to be there. What am I going to do with it? What am I going to do about it? The options mostly in this situation are accepting the behavior, understanding it is not the person, it is the illness. And again, it's taking time away. That's why we say the self-care is so important to be able to deal with these very challenging behaviors.
Thank you for that, Joanne. The only thing is that I could add is to make sure not to escalate the situation, by being angry or upset with the person.
We had a few interesting questions come in. So if you permit me, I'm going to choose some of them. And maybe some of you are here who sent them in. I have one here that somebody wrote in that says, it's hard not to feel some guilt when taking care of my own needs first, unless there's a crisis, due to years of conditioning as a daughter and a mom and wife and a healthcare professional. Standing up for myself sometimes brings backlash. I thought this was really an important question because, and we mentioned about women and role, how we get so set and conditioned in our roles. So what's interesting is if we've done this for years and years, don't forget everybody else around us is used to that. It's almost like we've trained them to expect that we are going to be the carer. So what's important is recognizing, okay, you know what, I need to make a change because I can't keep going on like that. But if all of a sudden I'm backing off, I think it's natural to get backlash because the others around you might feel shocked and surprised. What's going on? What's changing? So it's important, if we're recognizing that we have to make a change, we have to help our network, our family carers also know that we're going to make a change, and that, yes, they're really used to you being the one, but this just has to change. And we need to give them time to rebalance, to recalibrate. So I really appreciated that question. It's natural to get backlash. We have to be patient and help people along with. So if there's not any questions, I'm going to go to another one that came
Sorry,
in.
Joanne, I'm going to interrupt you. I just wanted to share a few comments that one of our listeners made. Just about the taking the time to take the deep breaths and to pause, as you mentioned in your presentation. And they also mentioned, in addition to the breathing, that just to relax the eyes and the eye muscles for 1 to 3 minutes, because that is also a useful reset. So I thought that was a great tip. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, that's really great, because breathing doesn't always work for everybody. And also when you do, I love that suggestion about relaxing your eyes, also relaxing your jaw. When we're feeling tense, until we allow ourselves to think about how our body feels, it's shocking how we can be tensing up our muscles. So great suggestions. Thanks for that.
I just want to go back to the question before. I certainly could relate to that question myself.
Which one? The one about backlash?
About backlash, yes.
Yeah.
Because I was a caregiver for my mom and working in the healthcare system, it wasn't so much that there was backlash from others. There was that always telling me what an amazing care partner I am and what an amazing daughter, created even more guilt for myself. It added guilt onto me. And even though in one way, it was like, I felt good about the fact that people saw me in a certain light. But I think the most important thing that I could say, if you really need to step back, you have to think of yourself at that point in a way that I had to set limits as well, so that I could continue being the daughter and caregiver for my mother.
Yeah, it's one thing to say it and to say we know we shouldn't feel guilty, but I find that emotion also really tricky, Lucy. It just comes and it just hits you, and it's one of the toughest ones to put aside. Somebody wrote in also, just dealing with guilt about time for self, doing an activity or traveling without the person with dementia coming along. So I don't want to minimize how easy it is just to say, do it, take time for yourself. You have to care for yourself. That can be a pressure too. Because the truth is, if you have always done something with your person, whether it's a spouse or it's a mother-daughter, and you've always done this together, then when you're going to go ahead and do it without them, it isn't the same. You do miss them. It is a loss. So we don't want to negate them. And even if we encourage you to do it, it's going to take some time to get used to doing things differently. So I always say again, acknowledge, okay, just feel that emotion, allow yourself to feel it, take a breath. It's going to be different though. It's going to be different.
Yeah, it's not all or nothing. I think little tiny steps are really important. If you feel guilty about leaving that person, try doing something for yourself for half an hour, 15 minutes. So, one step at a time.
Yeah. I think that leads into one of the questions that came up, Lucy, because it's always a sense of balance. And I want to acknowledge our French-speaking participants here today. So I'll read you the question in French, and then I'll translate it. Somebody wrote in, c'est difficile de trouver l'équilibre entre prendre soin de mon conjoint affecté par la maladie et prendre soin de moi. So somebody's writing in about how difficult it is to find the équilibre, the balance between the time for them and the time for me. and it is just like a balance scale, you know. Somebody else wrote in, my husband just went into long-term care and I'm so exhausted, I'm limiting to my visits to once a week. You know what? Only you. Oh, I think somebody. I think, is anybody else hearing that? I think somebody's needs to mute themselves.
Okay, Joanne.
Yeah. So so I was saying, it's only you can find the balance. No one can tell you how much time to take for yourself, how much time to devote to caregiving. It's really trial and error. You're taking some time and figuring out as you go. There's no right or wrong.
The other thing also is the caregiver journey is so fluctuates, you know, so there's the whole, every time there's that adjustment period that you need to look at what's going on presently. And, you know, that guilt feeling is going to be there because in reality, one of the things that I said, which really touched me very strongly, is I always felt that nobody can take care of my mother the way I do. Forget it.
Yeah.
And some caregivers will say that to me, you know, it's true. Others couldn't take care of exactly the way I did, but as long as I felt that she was not at risk and she was okay, it was so important for me to let go and to give her a chance to get to know other people. It's very important for that because that whole journey where caregivers kind of many times that's what makes it so guilty because you can't let go, you want to let go. So these are the things that you really have to kind of sit down. I like what you said, Joanne, about journaling. I think that's important. When things really trigger you, sit down, write about it, look at it, what happened, and try to see how can I move forward. Because the growth, as we were talking about yourself, how you see yourself, is a growing experience when you're caregiving.
Yeah. Diane, anything in the chat, or you want me to go to another question that came in?
We did just get a question. So we just lost my mom 8 months ago. So sorry for your loss, Jennifer. And even on her deathbed, she was worried about my dad. So I feel a lot of pressure to uphold my promise to take care of him. He put me in charge of finances. He was rushed to the hospital 2 weeks ago, and I've been looking after his health, making some of his meals. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So much is put on us. It's a lot. And especially when we're thinking of what would my mom have expected? What would my mom want me to do? And I think this goes back also to that self-image of ourselves, and also family dynamics. How much can we take on? How much can we do? Lucy, do you have anything to add to this one?
I think it just goes along with being a care partner, a caregiver. This is a lot of what we have to experience. And it is difficult. And remember, Joanne said, I mean, there are promises that we made, and sometimes you can't uphold those promises. And it's not easy. So I do believe that if you're really having a very, very hard time, maybe you do need the support of a social worker or a counselor to go in to deal with these issues and to really talk them through the what ifs of the situation. So that's a gift that you can actually give yourself. And we all need that kind of support from time to time.
I think also when you do seek help, whether it's a therapist or a social worker, just hearing yourself voice your feelings, that alone, just if somebody can provide you the space. So if you're not one to engage a therapist, if you have someone you really trust who's a good listener, talking to somebody can really make a difference. I know Lucy and I, we definitely use each other in that way. We helped each other, and this kind of support is so critical. There's a question here that I know many participants may experience. And this one says, to occupy my husband 100% of the time is a mammoth responsibility. He doesn't want to be with anyone else. So this speaks to what you were talking about, Lucy. We're the only one who can do it well enough. And what do we do on top of that if they just don't want you to leave? They not only they might verbalize they don't want you to leave, but they could even cry and be sad and be distressed and feel insecure when you're leaving. I mean, if that doesn't provoke guilt, what does? So imagine you're in that situation. You need the time for yourself, but you're having to deal with the reaction of your person. And I think in this case, you have to take it slow, but we have to help our people living with dementia to get used to other people, even if in the beginning it's tough. And the CLSCs can help you with this as well in your support workers. You start by engaging somebody and being in the same room with them. Have them come over, have them get used to their presence, have them learn what makes your person feel more comfortable, what are their habits, and then slowly wean yourself away from the situation. Go away for half an hour to begin and come back, and then go away and lengthen the time. So you're almost training your person to get used to you not being there. But it's extremely important. If we just say nope, they don't want anybody else, then you're really stuck. And if as long as you can manage it, it's okay. But if you do exhaust yourself, how long can you keep going on for? Again, the message, self-care, that's the strategy. If we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to do it for as long. We're not going to be able to do it as well.
And remember that if you don't, resentment will set in. You're going to become angry. You're going to be feeling really unappreciated. And so all these emotions will trigger. I love the idea. I think it's really important to have somebody come in, introduce it very slowly, very much what you said, Joanne. Even if it's 15 minutes, if you're in an apartment, walking out in the hall, you're still around, you still know what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. We do have one of our listeners who would like to ask a question. Jose, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, Jose.
Hello. It's I think a good moment. It just comes. It was on the same topic of the person being very distressed when I leave.
Yeah.
And I must say that I got an advice that changed a lot for me. From actually a social worker from the CLSC. So at least the where she is in Laval, and they came in and talked to her, looked at how she was reacting, what was bothering her, and they gave me one piece of advice that I found incredibly useful in reducing the guilt. No, she's already quite advanced in dementia, and she's in a care home. It's my mother, and they told me, forget about the good manners. The strategy should be to try not to trigger that distress in her. So when you're going to go away, stop saying goodbye. Stop saying, I'm going to come back in tomorrow or in a week. And on top of it, I'm an expatriate, so I even live far away. She won't remember in 3 minutes from now. So what you're going to do, you're going to call on the people on the floor, the préposé, the nurse, to distract her for a minute, and you just leave quietly. You're going to bring down the level of stress for her and the level of guilt for you. And I thought that changed so many things for both of us, actually.
I'm so happy to hear two things: that you found a strategy that worked, and also you're showing our participants here that you reached out and got the help you needed. And this is exactly what we want, all of you today here to be sharing is your strategies. You know better than anybody your person and what can work. So glad that you shared that.
Yeah. And I encourage people to reach out. At least it was some kind of educator that is specialized in dealing with people with dementia.
And one of the participants just thanked you and said, "Gee, I find that so helpful." Just so you should know.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you so much. That's what this is all about, is sharing and giving little tips and working through.
Yeah. Thanks, Lucy and Joanne. We have another question in the chat about one of our listeners whose mother is aggressive to all outsiders and rejects help. The only other family member has refused to help, so even just to babysit for an hour. So this caregiver is feeling, very alone. So what can she do?
Well, that's a very difficult situation to be in, I have to say, especially if the person you're caring for is becoming aggressive. My first question would be, how long has this been going on? Is this a new situation that this person is displaying? Since we don't know, what the behavior is. I hate to say this, but sometimes it's very important to maybe take her to the doctor and explain to the doctor what's going on. I know all of us don't want to look at extra medication, but sometimes when a person is hurting so much and they don't have the ability to, or the insight to understand what's going on, there are sometimes medications that do lessen that agitation. It's not the only way, obviously, but I think I would consider, if it's something new that's happening, to take the person to see the doctor.
I'm just going to add also, Lucy, thanks for those suggestions, because that can make you feel trapped and feel like then it's impossible. And we can't allow ourselves as caregivers to continue on that. Again, you have to think of your own health. I want to recommend also Carmen Desjardins. She's a specialist in behaviors, and she was on McGill Cares recently. Diane, I don't know if you can put the link in the chat.
I will.
But she also describes these for difficult and agitation and aggressive behaviors. There are non-pharmacological approaches first, and when that fails, that's when we do turn to medication. And believe me, Lucy and I are never advocating going to medication first. But in the end, remember, when there's two people in the relationship, sometimes we can't choose one over the other. Sometimes we have to make decisions to save both of you.
I just wanted to add, so the listener who raised the question mentioned that her mother has late-stage dementia and is taking a number of antipsychotics. She has some discretion with the dosage. And I posted the link in the chat to the webinar with Carmen Desjardins.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, and we are unfortunately nearing noon. So maybe I'll just wrap up right now. So thank you so much, Joanne and Lucy, and everyone who's participating from home this week. Today's recording will be posted on our website in the Caring Conversations page. And we also want to know what you think about Caring Conversations. So I'm going to add a short link in the chat, and it will also be emailed to you if you could just share your thoughts with us on this webinar. Our next Caring Conversation is going to be on April 30th, and it's going to be on the topic of the positive aspects of caregiving. So Thank you again. Please note that Caring Conversations is a project of the McGill Dementia Education Program, which is funded by private donations. If you'd like to join our mailing list, make a donation to our program, or learn about our other resources, please visit our website at mcgill.ca/dementia. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the sunshine if it's sunny in your neck of the woods.
Thank you,
Everybody.
everyone.
Take care. Thank you.